We've assessed all the rosters. Now it's time to consider the coaches, the best of the best concerning head coaches, coming your way today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase.
Joe, happy Tuesday to you.
Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday.
What we are, is it a week away from rookies reporting for, or there's two teams, the Hall of Fame game teams, I think, have vets report a week from today.
Wow. Yeah, I know a lot of rookies report early next week.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're 2 weeks away from like league-wide report dates. What dead period?
Yeah.
What dead period, Joe?
You can smell it, Kyle Krabs. It's in the air.
I was fortunate enough to have the entire Jalen Ramsey, Johnny Smith sagas to get me through the month of June.
What in the world? Yeah. That was a blessing.
It was less of a slow period for me than what I usually felt like, which is why I looked at the calendar. I'm like, we report in 2 weeks? All this stuff I did in years past, I didn't get a chance to do any of it yet. I don't know what I'm going to do.
You had topical things all the time. So
that's right.
Yeah.
What off season? No off season here on Locked On NFL Scouting as we continue to churn along. We're looking at head coaches across the league today. We did quarterbacks yesterday. The 8 weeks prior, we did rosters minus starting quarterbacks. Each team got its moment in the sun. It was cool to see a lot of the turnout for a lot of the teams. The fan base is showing up in a big, big way on the both the YouTube channel and the audio-only versions of the show. So we appreciate you guys for checking it out. Head coaching tiers, a little complicated as far as how we do it. But Joe and I individually, and in the intro, I was just really looking at our numbers for the first time because this is the first time I'm getting a chance to see the numbers side by side. We tier them we'll put them in tiers. Maximum amount of points is 5. 5, and then you get 4.5, then you got 4, then you got 3.5, then you get 2, 3.5, and 2.5, 2, etc., all the way down. And get a handful of elite coaches. I think we have our Rushmore of coaches for this year, here and now, where you have 4 names that have at least a 4.5 or better when you average our 2 scores together. And then you've got a very crowded group at 4.25, which is just sitting outside that. So we're going to start by looking at the top of the top and then looking at kind of the coagulated, really middle 16 probably, right? Who's got the most to prove in the middle 16, and then a whole bunch of new names and who has the most to prove and who's going to be rising up the ranks the fastest in 2025.
I was just looking up the definition of coagulated. So
it's all muddy mess.
Yeah, a coherent. It's nicely done. Nicely done. I wanted to make sure that was one I could replicate if necessary. So there's only one.
Be honest, you're never going to use that word in your life.
I'm going to try. I'll try. I'll see if I can pull it off.
Not today on the show. You will never use it again if you use it today on the show.
Well, I'll be careful. I'll choose my timing here.
Yeah.
So there's only one coach that received the full points from both of us, and that's because I only put one coach.
Yeah. Why do you hate every coach not named Andy Reid?
Well, because I felt like he deserved to have a little bit more than every other coach. I have so much respect for the resume, and even when you don't feel like his team has it that day, he's a guy that just has the right call at the right time over and over and over and over and over and over. And they face a lot of adversity every season with different pieces that are and are not available. And I don't know, their ability to just figure it out regardless of circumstances just impresses me. And I had to put Andy Reid in a tier of his own.
And you did put him in a tier of his own because I was stunned to see some of these names in the 4 tier for you. And I'm like, wow. And then I looked and saw, you only gave out 2 4.5s and you gave out 1 5.
Yeah.
I gave out 4 5s. So I gave out more 5s than you gave out 4.5s and 5s combined. So I respect the concept of Andy Reid being a tier within a tier and being a tier in and of himself. And as a result, because you did that, he does get more points than anybody else. I also gave 5 out of 5 points to Sean McVay, who was one of your very exclusive 4.5s.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Nick Sirianni, because I see the point total here, and he obviously hot seat last year with how 23 ended for the Eagles, and what does he do here, right? These were the questions that everybody was asking, and we had our own questions about Nick Sirianni, so I had him in the 4 out of 5 bucket. You had him as one of your 2 coaches in the 4.5 bucket. So just talk to me about Nick, about what was obviously winning the Super Bowl this year aside, where you felt the inspiration to rank him as highly as you did in the same bucket as Sean McVay.
Well, it's the Super Bowl win. It's also taking another team to the Super Bowl pretty recently as well. And I mean, let's be honest, had a real good shot to win that game against Kansas City the first time around. I know that their roster is loaded. I get that. But I've seen loaded rosters not maximize on their potential. And I give Nick Sirianni a lot of credit for that. And I'll tell you this, I don't know that Nick Sirianni would be a good head coach for a lot of other teams. I don't think he can go to Tampa or Dallas or LA and be effective, but I think he's the perfect coach for that team and that city and that fan base. And I give coaches a lot of credit, man. Like, the job that you have to foster the right environment, to establish, standards that a group of really talented football players are willing to buy in, and then they take ownership in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I give him a lot of credit. I think he's done a lot in a short period of time. Obviously, I think 2023 was a black eye for them, and I think they made some goofy coaching hires, and that got in the way. And I think Nick Sirianni couldn't have done a better job of pivoting and getting the right people in place. So I know that they have a great roster and a great general manager, but the coach is the one that's got to pull the right strings. And I give Nick Sirianni a lot of credit for what this team has become.
Yeah. And even this past year put out fires, right? You got the
Always.
AJ Brown on the sideline reading the book saga, right? And it's the passing offense being as frustrating as it was in the heart of the season. And they got big personalities there in Philadelphia. And you look at some of the other places where there's a lot of star power and personalities, and how that management has happened hasn't been as successful. And that's, for me, I look at names that I also graded very favorably, like Sean McVay, and how he, in their peak when they had their kind of star-studded roster, was a lot of stars, a lot of big personalities. Mike Tomlin got 5 points for me. Is there anybody better at keeping everything under lock and key and in-house? And guys is maybe not on the straight and narrow, but if they're not on the straight and narrow, you don't hear about it. And then those guys go somewhere else and you hear about it all the time. Right. And so that element of it for me, and I had Nick Sirianni in the 4 out of 5 bucket, in large part because of what you just said in the role that he has within that locker room, and from a leadership perspective, other coaches that I typically graded very well and very highly also had that same merit to them.
I think the best leaders are also great delegators, man. And I think that Nick Sirianni, to have so many different parts of that operation running as well as it does, the player development that happens, guys being the best versions of themselves for the Eagles. I know that there's you can point your finger in a lot of directions, but he's the freaking head coach and he's responsible for it. And I know that would be a little bit controversial. I've received some pushback already as I've kind of shared my rankings with other people, but I want to give him his flowers.
Okay.
All right.
You want to go to break, and you want to finish anything? You want to reveal kind of 4 out of 5 or better coaches? And so that's kind of give recognition to, hey, we think you're a great head coach or better.
Yeah, we'll do that.
After the break.
Next, stick with us.
Right.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your seat view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. And speaking of no surprises, with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay with no hidden fees. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right. So 4 points or better out of a possible 5. We had Andy Reid, Sean McVay, John Harbaugh, and Mike Tomlin from a consensus perspective, all had at least 4.5 points from a consensus perspective or better. Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Kevin O'Connell, Nick Sirianni, Kyle Shanahan all had 4.25 points. And then Sean McDermott and Dan Campbell had 4 points as head coaches. And again, this is largely about your impact, not just on the X's and O's, right? Because we're doing offensive and defensive play callers the next 2 days on the show after this, but also from a leadership, a game management, a culture, all of those things weighs into this as well. I would like Green Bay Packers fans to know that I gave LaFleur 4 points.
Yeah, I should have too. That's an administrative error on my behalf.
Done.
Yeah, that's a 4. Yes, please,
crisis
God.
averted.
Yeah,
LaFleur's in the bucket. You can put him in whatever order you want as the 4 out of 5 or better club.
Yeah.
So that's 12 head coaches. That's not a math guy, but almost over a third of the league.
Yeah, I think there's some good head coaches in the league, and I think there's some guys right underneath this that are knocking on the door. I mean, like Dan Quinn and D'Amico Ryans are right there in this conversation. Mike Vrabel, I think it can validate some things here with New England. Those guys will be in this 4-point or more tier. I think this is like your very clear upper echelon group of coaches with obviously so much turnover year by year, right? There's a lot of new coaches in the fray, and we don't really give points to things we don't know about. There's things we like and don't like, but we don't really know. But I think this is the best.
And for a couple of those guys on the outside looking in that you mentioned, for Dan Quinn, the big thing for me is, can you do it again in Washington, right? Because as not a first-time head coach, we have the body of work of what it looked like at the end in Atlanta, right? I can't just forget all of that happened to just look at the 24 Commanders. So if Washington has a strong follow-up season, he will then move into that bucket. For me, for D'Amico Ryans, would like to see did the offensive issues get fixed, right? And that hiring process and moving on from an offensive coordinator and making some of those changes, obviously from an X's and O's standpoint. Spoiler alert, when we do defensive play callers on Thursday, D'Amico Ryans is going to be very well represented for the X's and O's exclusive element of this conversation.
Yeah, simultaneously, right? 2 seasons, 2 division titles, 2 seasons with a playoff win.
Right.
There's a lot of success, but
right.
There's an overall operation here that matters, and I think we've got to solidify that side of the ball and feel comfortable with the direction, even though there's a lot of good. But
so we had, what was it, 6 new head coaches this year? Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan, Brian Schottenheimer, Liam Cohen, Kellen Moore, Aaron Glenn.
Yeah,
Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
And then Mike Vrabel is pre-existing.
Retreads, yeah.
So, but if you look at not new hires, right? We had 12 as 4 points or better. And then we had 8 new head coaches. When you look at the other, not a math guy, 12 teams with 12 head coaches, which head coach to you has the most to prove in 2025?
Boy, there's some good answers. The one that stands out the most, though, is Shane Steichen. I don't look at especially the offensive talent and feel like they're missing anything outside of a quarterback, which is a big thing to be missing. But I want to see his coaching prowess show up in a way that maximizes that remainder of offense to get the most out of that quarterback. And I think we'll learn a lot about him. Plus, we heard some pretty big comments about culture and leadership and accountability last season. And I think they have a really big opportunity this year to validate Steichen or give you the information that you need to say, you know what, not our guy. I think he's got a ton to prove, I think. But there's other good answers, but that was the one that really popped for me.
Are you talking about Shane Steichen or Mike McDaniel?
Well, as I was talking, I was like, man, this does apply to Mike McDaniel as well. And I'm curious to see. I think there's some reimagined elements to that offense that I think will really help with hopefully more of an emphasis on inside zone duo. They have changed their personnel in a lot of ways from a blocking perspective that I think will help unlock their run game, which I think is important.
Well, Mike also has the baked in Tua Tagovailoa IR stint, losing winnable games last year. And the ceiling of the team would still be the same, right? You'd still have all the same questions.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have an 8-9 record to show for. And you'd theoretically be looking at, like, if they don't lose to the Colts, in which the Colts had like 130 yards of offense and Raheem Mostert fumbled in the second half, and you tried a fullback sneak and you were up 10 points at halftime and lost the game with Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle playing quarterback, right? That was a winnable game. The Jets game in Week 18, Tua Tagovailoa missed that one as well. I thought the Seattle game was a winnable game with how closely it was played until about the final 10 minutes when kind of things broke open and Skylar Thompson started in Week 3. You had opportunities where I think Mike has that baked in, where I agree that Shane Steichen, he was a part of the decision-making process to bring Anthony Richardson in, right? And so I think he has his hands a little bit more in that mess. So I would be inclined to agree that Steichen probably has a little bit higher amplification of the heat that's on him. Obviously, Brian Daboll is a great hot seat candidate who's kind of scored in this same tier above the first-year head coaches that we don't really know what we're getting. I want to shout out Mike McDonald, though, as I think he's got a lot to prove with. He came in last year, and they won 10 games. Scheme is not the question. But the decision-making process from an offensive coordinator standpoint and how bad that experience was and how they took a blowtorch to the entire offense. There were, DK Metcalf, bye. Tyler Lockett, bye. The offensive coordinator, bye. Geno Smith, bye. Like, massive changes. And it's a lot of new. It's a bold decision to sign Sam Darnold in free agency. It's a bold decision to bring in Cooper Kupp. How does that all work? And I'm not saying he's a hot seat candidate, but as far as the question being the most to prove, like, for the same reason that I wanted before I put D'Amico Ryans in that upper echelon, you got to get that other side of the ball right as a defensive coach. And they've got a lot of new. They've made a lot of changes. And it's one for me because of how sweeping the changes were after just 1 year. I think he's got a lot to prove with what their offense looks like in Seattle this year.
I think that's a good call out as well. I'm impressed in some elements, and I'm curious in other elements as well. Man, there's a talking point that I want to get to. I'm going to hold it for the other side of it, where we'll also talk about fast risers here, some of these new hot coaches. Folks, be sure to stick with us. thing I was kind of holstering is a little chatter on Todd Bowles, head coach of the Buccaneers, where
the defensive coach. You got a question on?
Well, yes, but also, I mean, he's been their head coach for 3 years. They've won 3 division titles, and he's sitting here just inside the top 20. You know, he's admittedly a little bit challenging to slot, but I want to give him credit for the success that the team has had
with coordinator changes.
Yeah,
annually, right? Like
literal. Is that 3 years in a row with a different OC?
Because it's Grizzard this year. It was Cohen
and
last
Canales.
year and Canales the year before, and then he left for Carolina.
Yeah.
We both have Todd as a 3 out of 5.
Right. Average head coach, right? Basically. But there's a resume of success. It's pretty impressive.
I expect them to win the division again this year.
Yeah.
Who do you think has the most? Is it let's consult the sortable scoring sheet that has all of the second highest ranked team in the NFC South is the Atlanta Falcons. But there's a pretty decent gap with how we have everything rated for Tampa and Atlanta. So we expect that Tampa is going to win this division again this year. Michael Penix is a big X factor in that for Atlanta. By extension, what that means for Drake London and his production, and Kyle Pitts getting back on track. Atlanta, dude, I don't want to hijack. I'm going to save it. Remind me at some point to talk to you about Terry Fontenot investments, and that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to tip you off on what direction I'm going here. Okay?
All right.
Remind me to come back to it at some point. But coaches rising up the ranks, and the general rule of thumb is if we don't have a body of work for you, we kind of just put you at the bottom because we don't know, right? It would be very disingenuous for me to put Ben Johnson as a head coach in year one, never being a head coach before, as a 3 or 3.5 out of 5 points.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, right? Now, right. I chose to divide a little bit the first year head coaches with what I liked and what I didn't like. And I have Ben Johnson slightly above names like Schottenheimer and Cohen and Kellen Moore and Aaron Glenn. I think I earlier in the show accidentally said Brian Callahan was a first-year head coach, which he obviously is not. He's going to year 2. But I do have Ben Johnson slightly ahead. You put Johnson, Schottenheimer, Cohen, Kellen Moore, Aaron Glenn all in the same bucket.
Yeah. And I'll be honest. I mean, if I were to pick a couple of those out that I'm a little higher on, Liam Cohen would be on that list just because of the offensive trajectory that has happened everywhere. That's some goofy stuff, but I really am high on Aaron Glenn, and I'm high on Ben Johnson. I think you've got three hires that stand out to me. If I were to go, hey, a little bit more, those would be where I went, but I wanted to be consistent and just put them all in the, hey, I have no idea, here's 1 point bucket.
Which is ironic because arguably the best roster situation is Dallas, right? You get Dak Prescott back healthy. They restock the offensive line. They now have another wide receiver to go with CeeDee Lamb. They're healthy on the edge defensively. They got some questions in the secondary from a health perspective, but their linebacker group's not great, but they retain some key talent. They look like a more talented team. It just feels like the least whelming, right? Instead of underwhelming, the least whelming hire you had was Brian Schottenheimer.
Is that really a word? Whelming?
I don't believe so, but maybe it is. New vocabulary for Joe?
Yeah. Twice in one show, man. It's crazy. For the 2024 cycle, when you look at...
It is a word.
It is? You've confirmed it? Yeah. All right. Very good. When you look at the 2024 cycle, that includes Raheem Morris, Dave Canales, Brian Callahan. I don't really want to include Harbaugh, McDonald, or Quinn, because I think those are all teams that won 10 games and went to the playoffs. Not Seattle, but they won 10 games. Mm-hmm. For Morris, Canales, and Callahan, like, What's your concern level for those situations? Do you think any of them are in danger of not making it to year 3?
I don't think so. I feel like there's some good momentum with the South teams. With obviously, you saw some signs of life from Rice in the second half of the year, and Atlanta just made their investment in Penix. Dallas does the right name shake free that would spur Jerry to move on from a short-term patch and Schottenheimer. Like, if Brian Schottenheimer does the Cam Cameron thing and goes 1-15, don't think it's going to happen. But like, that would be the kind of higher. Now, I don't know why I'm answering with Schottenheimer, but because you asked about Callahan.
I was sitting here wondering, boy, what did I say?
Tennessee does strike me a little bit as the kind of organization that's been jumping around. I don't think so after just pairing Callahan with Cam Ward, but we've alternated. Is it 3 or 4 straight years with firing a coach or a GM?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
tough.
It's been tough to kind of get those things synced up. If they're disastrous again, I think they'd be the closest, but I would also be surprised.
Yeah. And I think in the case of Canales and Morris, like, I'm concerned that Atlanta's defense isn't going to be any better. Legitimately concerned there. And I think that'd be a problem.
Holster my thought no talking point.
Yeah. Well, he's largely responsible for that. And Dave Canales, I mean, I think everyone's pretty excited about how that season ended. But there's now a little bit of expectation for that to continue. And Dave Tepper's been a little quiet lately, Kyle. We hadn't heard too much from that guy. You never know what's going to be a trigger point for him. If they win 6 or 7 games, is that going to get anyone excited? They have to do better than that. Are we sure their pass rush is going to be there on defense? Is Bryce Young going to take a step?
A lot of young guys on the defensive pass rush group, right? But they spent a lot of money as well.
Yeah. They gave up. Do you realize how many rushing yards the Panthers gave up last year?
Oh, I'm sure it's a ton.
I was looking at this morning. They gave up over 3,000 rushing yards, Kyle.
3,000?
Over 3,000 rushing yards.
Who tagged them for the most?
Tampa, 236.
Oh, yeah, that offensive line. Hot knife through butter, right?
Dude, they gave up over 200 yards 9 times. They gave over 190 yards 11 times.
They had one game last year in which they gave up less than 100 rushing yards to an opposing offense. That was against the Raiders.
Yeah. Like if the Raiders would just had 100 yards.
The fifth least amount of rushing yards that Carolina gave up in a game last season was 165.
I think for a lot of teams, that might be the most they gave up, right?
That's half the season we went over 200 plus rushing yards. And then we had Atlanta at 198, New Orleans at 197, and New Orleans at 180.
This is going to consume Kyle for probably the next 3 hours.
This is 5.2 yards per carry as well. Meanwhile, Carolina, they did give away the 4th most guaranteed at signing cash of any team in free agency this year.
I was watching their YouTube video of like their behind the scenes off season, and they all sit down in the room and they show you what they want to show you, but they're like, what's priority number 1? Everyone's like, we got to stop the run. Okay. Here's Bobby Brown. Here's Deshaun Wharton.
We're going to Brown back.
That'll be Patrick a big one.
Jones.
Right. Patrick Jones, not necessarily known for the pass rush, but he'll help with the edges and stuff like that. So man, that's got to improve. Didn't they draft Lathan Ransom? Am I dreaming about this? Yeah, there's your
They added Trevon Moehrig and Lathan Ransom to the safety room.
Yeah, that'll help you tackling as well. So
unbelievable. 12 games with 165 rushing yards allowed or more.
You can't play. There's nothing worse than having a team that can't stop the run. It like literally it snatches your soul.
It's a slow bleed.
Oh, you're just out physical. You can't match it. Blown off the ball.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Kyle.
How many games did Carolina play last year where they gave up less than 20 first downs to opposing teams? Don't look.
They gave up less?
Less than 20 first downs.
Probably not many. This is one of the worst defenses ever. I'm sure they may not have done it a single time.
18 was the lowest, and a loss to Philadelphia. Every other team had at least 20 first downs against the Carolina Panthers.
Was that a Kenny Pickett start? What happened there?
Let me check the box score.
Let's see.
No, this was the game that the Eagles fans booed Hurts because he went 14-21 for 108 yards.
They booed him for that?
Yeah. This was just when the passing offense was at its lowest point.
If you could just whisper in their ear, you're gonna win the Super Bowl.
And the Eagles were down 16-14 in the fourth quarter of that game.
Any given Sunday, right?
Any given Sunday. That's right. That's going to do it for us here. So the coach in the bottom 6 that we have that will be highest on this list next year is who? As we get out of here.
Brian Schottenheimer.
I'm going to say Liam Cohen. There we go. That's going to do it for us. We are looking at offensive play callers tomorrow on the show, and then defensive play callers on Thursday. We hope you guys will come back and see us. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino. We are out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all again soon.